Good evening, industry explorers. Welcome to another episode of our series, Start Your Career, or as I have it here, Start a Career In. And we are having expert guests come in and share their expert advice on how to get started in certain careers, certifications that are important, membership bodies are important, market trends. We will see where the conversation takes us. And today we've got Dwayne Douglass talking to us about starting a career in video game sound design. How are you doing, Dwayne?
I'm doing really well, all things considered.
all things considered. Dwayne, if I may ask, can you please share with us your life experience in 1 minute?
Let's see. Specifically in video game sound design, I started making mods on the Quake 2 engine in like 96, 97, catapulted that into making a very popular mod called Action Half-Life back in like 99, 2000. And I kept doing that up through about 2005 when that kind of died out. Had a family. About 5 years ago, I started my own small indie video game company, and I've been making 2 separate games, one programmed and everything. I'm doing everything by myself, and one with a small team. They're all both nights and weekends projects, so neither have come to fruition as of yet. But and I'm an avid gamer, so I play a lot of video games. That's it.
Killer, with 5 seconds to spare. I love it. So, Dwayne, you are actually a cast member and you work in the tech services department at the Disneyland Resort.
Yeah.
Can you, and we're here to talk about the crossover between entertainment and events and the gaming industry, specifically when it comes to sound design. So, audio guys, this one's for you.
Yeah. I don't know. I've been posting stuff about skills you'd need to learn to build upon what you already have. If you do live audio or any sort of recording, which a lot of guys they know the audio recording programs, the DAWs like Pro Tools or Ableton or any of those, and those are a really good basis to go into an industry that's completely pandemic proof and has been growing. The last few years, I'd say probably last 5 years, the video game industry makes more money than the movie industry does by a wide margin.
Wow. How wide of a margin?
Like billions upon billions of dollars.
Wow. Yeah, I had no idea. That's wild.
It's grown. It used to be nerds in the basement playing it, but now it's everyone because they're on phones. Mm-hmm. They're on TVs. They're not really in arcades anymore. And people play them everywhere. They're big business. Some games when they come out, they sell, multiple millions of copies, and that's, ends up being a lot of money. But it's also a very wide dispersed industry, unlike the movie industry where there's 10 big film companies putting out their blockbusters every year. Well, video games, there's so many niches. It's more like the music industry, really. Anyways.
So there's different kinds of games. There's the mobile applications. There's, first person type games that you would play on a console. There's computer games. How do you break into the industry? And when you do, how do you kind of navigate through the different types of games that you could be involved in, and as well as the different aspects of sound design within the gaming industry?
Basically, the techniques for a big, huge, giant budget game like the newest Star Wars game or something like that, all the way down to this tiniest little indie game, the processes are the same. So the techniques you use are the same. You might be, and you're just really going for whatever the style is of what you're making. It may be something very simple and 8-bit pixelated, but it still needs sound design, and you're still going to be creating those sounds from scratch, or modifying another sound to become what you need. And those techniques may change across those, but once you get, when it comes to it, like an 8-bit indie game versus a regular game, like a 3D game. But overall, those skills are going to be the same across the board, and it doesn't really matter. As far as how you get into those industries, it's like many of the other creative things where you have to have a portfolio. So yeah, you have to put some time in building one, which that is one of those things that you just have to do if you're going to be an animator, or if you're going to get into pretty much anything in that sort of creative thing. You're going to have a portfolio to show off. But with sound design, if you're an audio person and you know how to do audio in the first place, it's not that hard to learn some new information, some new techniques, and build that portfolio.
For some of the listeners, so we're trying to help people who are in the entertainment and events industry that are already involved in audio find the crossover into the gaming industry. But for our listeners who may not have a career yet, who may be in high school or in college and are still figuring things out, can you just quickly describe what is sound design?
Sound design is literally coming up with the sound effects for a video game. In video games, sound design in live entertainment means something completely different. So it's more akin to what you would do for movie sound design, except with movies, every time you make a sound effect for a movie, you know exactly where the camera is. And every single time that sound is played, it's always in the same spot, and it's always at the same perspective as the audience has every single time. Whereas video games, you don't know what the player is going to do. So your sound design is slightly different, but it's still more akin to like movie sound design. So creating sounds for soundscapes and sound effects for all the various things that happen in a game. Sometimes it's really mundane stuff, like the little sound you make when you click the menu, and sometimes it's gunshots or heads exploding or whatever, like crazy thing that your game asks for.
And in games, sometimes when you do like a certain, like a mission or a side story, or you're doing an action, there's music that accompanies it. Is that a different aspect of sound design? Or
no, that would also be part of it.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely part of it. Not necessarily the creating the music, although that position is often one and the same in sound design for video games, depending on the company. A big EA or Activision game, they're going to have people that make the music and the people that do the sound effects. But in a smaller company, that might be the same person.
Okay, gotcha. What do you mean by indie games?
Oh, indie games would be independent games, so not made by a publisher. So, kind of like independent film, where it's not done by Disney and Universal and Warner Brothers. It's just something somebody came up with the money themselves and put it out there. Indie games are the same thing. Yeah. Gotcha.
And for our listeners who aren't already involved in audio, can you share some tips on gear that they can start getting, playing with, like maybe some gear on a budget, maybe some programs that people who are new to the industry should start playing with in order to build up their portfolio?
Yeah, the good news is really to do this, you really just need a laptop or a computer of some sort. And most of the software you can get and use for free. You can't sell anything that you make necessarily unless you pay a license for it. But which is pretty standard. But most of it you can go and get a free version of Pro Tools or Ableton, and or another DAW program that does the recording, and you can get both the video game engines that I have linked in the event. You can go and download for free and learn, and all of those things. There are a ton of YouTube videos out there. If you want to learn something nowadays, literally, you want to learn anything nowadays, you can, if you just choose to. That's literally the only barrier between you and knowledge, is your choice to learn it or not, because it's literally out there.
Okay, that's an amazing quote. I got to put that on a t-shirt. Just like, that's absolutely true. The only difference is a choice that you make. I did a little bit of research in the sound design world And one of the experts, I forget which one I was watching, but someone said that you should record everything and be ready at a moment's notice.
Yeah, I know. Actually, one of the guys that I linked in the his YouTube video, he's worked on a couple of games. He's kind of new to the industry, but so he has a really interesting perspective. But one of the things he does, he goes through exercises on his YouTube channel, talking about how to take sounds from his room that he creates in his room with his phone, and he creates like complex video game sounds, and he goes through exactly how he does it. So he had one where he created an explosion, and he did it by banging on a plastic tub, dropping some silverware into that tub, and then ripping cardboard. And he took all those, modified them heavily, obviously, and it sounded like a big budget explosion.
Oh, wow.
So you really don't need much to practice the techniques. You know, much like live audio, it's you know, in the live side, when you're learning it, you're not going to necessarily have the gear available that you would be using once you get into the industry. But when it comes to sound design, you can do what you need to do to learn what you need to learn without spending a lot of money.
What's a good starter microphone?
Well, it depends. You know, if you're going to be recording into a computer, you can just get like something like a Blue. They're not like the highest end, but they're cheap. They're really readily available everywhere you go, and they work, like they just work with computers. So you can do stuff like, you know, mash up fruits and vegetables to make, you know, flesh sounds if you're trying to design wounds or something like that. But yeah,
that's like getting into Foley.
There is definitely an element of Foley to video game sound design. Some of it's you're recording, some of it you're taking existing sounds from libraries and you're modifying them so they sound, I don't know, more real. I don't know if you've ever heard a gunshot recorded, like an actual gunshot. They sound really boring.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like on my phone, maybe.
Yeah,
you know, like a video of me and my cousins at the range, but
right. And does it sound like a movie? Right, exactly.
Not, yeah.
Because there's a lot of work that goes into those sounds, and it's even more so when it comes to video games, because there's a stereo version for the player when they're in first person. There's a mono version of that same sound with their this distance away. It plays a different sound at this distance and another sound at, you know, at that echoes when it fires everywhere. You know, so there's a lot of elements to putting together a sound for it. But like I said, as far as setting up on a budget, you really don't even need an expensive microphone. You don't need any of that to put a portfolio together.
Nice.
Because they're going to be looking more for the creativity and not the quality. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So before I do want to ask you about building a portfolio and how you would do that as an audio person, because when I think of portfolio, for me, it's very visual. You know, like if you're a set designer, you got pictures of completed sets, or, you know, whatever it is. You know, I'm so used to portfolios. When I think of that, the archetype I go to is something very visual, but that's not the case with sound, of course. So before we get into that, I wanted to ask you about game engines. What is a game engine? And share with us. I know you've got stuff to say, so I'm just going to let you.
Yeah, and I saw. I'll answer Gabby's. She just popped up. Gabby.
Oh, awesome. I'll throw that up there.
How do designers best capture ambient environmental sounds for games? Is this an element that's found in sound libraries? Now, usually they're created and they're multi-layered. You come up with, like, you know, multi-layers, just like you would in recording software where you have them in tracks. But the software I haven't really talked about yet will put those things together based on where the player is, rather than it just playing as one single track. Like in a film, if you were doing ambient sound, you would mix that all down. It would be one sound that you play in the background. But like I said, when it comes to the ambient sounds in a video game, a lot of it's location based. As you get near this, you're going to have different audio processing. Jack, I can't do it right now. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, like if you're in an electrical room and you're hearing like that ambient hum from the machines, and as you get closer to those processors, then the hum gets louder.
Yeah, and not only that, but if you're in a like a cave and a sound plays in the cave, it's going to have an echo to it versus if you stay, if you're outside, and all that's controlled by these the audio integration software.
Do you want to talk about the audio integration software or the game engines?
I'll talk about the game engine first because there's steps that lead. And again, this is part of the process of, if you want to learn this stuff, well, first of all, if you want to learn video game sound design, play video games. Not a lot, but at least you should play some, because you have to understand how they work and what they're doing. And if you don't play them, you won't really have a way to understand. You can come up with sound effects, but you won't necessarily understand. And you're going to be playing them. That's
like every teenager's favorite advice, I think, right?
Right. So,
thank you for the question, Gabby.
Yeah, thank you. And depending on, well, when it comes to game engines, depending on what company you're working for or what you decide as an indie game designer, there's a ton out there. Some are made like by a company and they use their own, and that's the only one they use. Like Valve, who makes Half-Life, they have the source engine and they made that in-house, that's theirs. And then there's the game engines that you can get and make your own game for free. You just pay them a licensing fee afterwards. So that's the two, and they're ubiquitous in the industry. So there's Unity, which is huge. If you look up Unity and like what games were made on it, odds are even people that don't know video games will probably know a game, like have heard of a game or two made on that engine. Same thing with Unreal.
Me, and I don't know.
Yeah, but I bet you if you read a list of names, you'd go, "Oh, I've heard of that game," because somebody talked about it somewhere.
Probably.
Yeah, because there's just so many. But both of those, I don't really know Unity. I know enough that it's there, and I know the basics. But I've worked in Unreal, so I can speak to that a little bit more. But really, they do the same things. It's much like the difference between Pro Tools and Logic or Ableton or something, where they all do the same thing. How they do it, what they call the tools, how they accomplish that's going to be a little different.
Like the user experience is a little different.
Yeah, but the end result is the same. And there's features that are different. So mostly what I'm going to speak on is Unreal, because that's what I know. But you can go download Unreal for free. Going back to your question about how do you make a portfolio for sound design, you do it visually, but you provide all the sound effects. So you take a scene from a movie and you recreate that scene's sound design by yourself, or you do some video game sound design in Unreal or something like that, capture it, put it on a reel.
You know what? I have seen a cast member doing that recently, Benjamin Edwards. He has been making compositions and different, I guess, mixes. Mixer is it means something else, but but he plays his compositions to like video from movies that everybody knows, so like he's made a composition for Nightmare Before Christmas or for Indiana Jones maybe, or Pirates. So yeah, you're absolutely right. When you have that visual element to it, it definitely it's beautiful, right? There's got to be some psychology. There's got to be something about psychoacoustics behind all of that, right?
I was just reading something, here's to get into a whole other thing about back in the 50s, they some scientists, some sociologists, I should say, had a tribe that didn't in, I think, Africa, that didn't have a lot of interaction with Western civilization, and they played some classical music for them and asked them to explain like what emotions it made them think of and feel. And they pretty much nailed it across the board. So like music, the point being that music's kind of a universal language. Even if you've never heard any piece of classical music before, you can still go, oh, that makes me feel this, or that makes me feel that. So yeah, there is a psychological aspect to sound design as well.
Very cool.
Even stuff like sometimes you have to use a cheesy sound effect, like because people expect it. Like they expect when somebody has a heart attack in a movie that the defibrillator is going to make a cha-chunk sound. But it doesn't. It's totally silent.
Yeah.
But if you don't put that in there, somebody's going to go, oh, weird. They won't know why.
Yeah.
But they'll think, that's kind of weird. But yeah, that's the magic of sound design. But I got to go all the way back to my college days to pull that. Because like I said, I do sound design on my own games, but it's I'm definitely not the expert. I am knowledgeable enough to tell people where to go to get the knowledge.
Right.
Which is what we're doing here.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. So okay, for listeners like myself as a host who is not very familiar with audio, is a game engine does it store, is it basically like a big file, if you will, that stores the audio and processes it?
No,
what exactly is a game engine?
It is doing everything. It is drawing what's on the screen and playing the audio and controlling the mechanics. It's literally the game. So the lighting system, the game rules, the audio, everything is contained within it.
It's the final product.
No, it's a canvas to an extent for an artist to use, but it's the most complex one out there. In other words, it's a big empty set of rules that a computer knows that if you do this, it'll do this on the screen. If you do that, you do, and then you got to go in there and program it. But the really complex stuff, like simulating sunlight, which is incredibly complex. The latest batch of consoles that came out this Christmas season are able to do something that the previous ones couldn't, which is do ray tracing, where they literally are bouncing light multiple times, and it makes the lighting look really realistic in a game. Which is funny to say to me, because I can remember Doom, when it was unique to shoot a rocket across the room and you'd see it light up the hallway as it went down the hall. Like, people would go, wow, did you see that? It was crazy. Nowadays it looks mundane.
My partner and I were playing Halo recently, and I was thinking to myself, wow, this animation looks really basic. And then he goes, oh, you can toggle between the original version and this version. And I'm like, original? And he toggles it, and it is even more basic, like how you map the texture on it, but it still looks flat. I mean, it was
pre-bump mapping. Oh, yeah.
It's fascinating. It is so fascinating. So with the game engines, is there like a separate department responsible for programming them, like computer programs that write script for it?
No, they're humans writing script, and it depends on
like a computer language like Java.
Yeah,
it's
C++. C++. Unreal Engine uses C++.
Oh, okay.
Unity uses C#.
Gotcha.
And they both have their own visual scripting language. Where they you can actually basically program in C++, but using like nodes that you're dragging across the screen, and it looks like a flowchart.
Well, that's something. That really is something. That's a topic for a whole other live stream, I think. Let's move on to audio integration software.
Okay, yeah. So you have the game engine, and you were building your game in it, and the industry standards. Yeah, both of those engines that are accessible to people that want to learn how to do this, Unity and Unreal, have their own way of calling audio cues and playing audio. But to do really complex stuff, there's two industry standards for audio integration in video games, and one's called FMOD, and the other's called WISE, but it's WWISE. So FMOD and WISE. Those are kind of the industry standards. If you go and look on job boards for video game sound design jobs, I guarantee you almost every single one you find is going to be asking you to have knowledge in one of those two, be proficient in them. So that's the main thing. If you have worked in the industry in audio, if you've done live or any sort of recording, and you want to get into video game sound design, what you absolutely need to do is learn either FMOD or WISE. And what those do is they modify the audio, and they set it up into big like cues, sort of. They call them events that can be called by the game engine. So say a character's walking, you'll have you'll have an event in Fmod or Wise that has a sound effect for him walking on cement, and one for wood, and one for metal, and one for grass, and one for gravel, and whatever. And it's playing them all, but it chooses which one to actually have the audio play based on what the character's doing in the game. And the game will trace what it's standing on. It'll get a message back saying, oh, this is grass, and then it'll play that. So that's what the audio integration software does. It also can create, reverb in places where you need it and get rid of it in others. So all that kind of stuff is done from inside that software.
It's like a ton of if-then statements. If character is doing this, then
well, that's
sound.
That's all happening in the game. But yes, that is exactly what it is. But that's all happening in the game engine. What you're doing in the audio integration software is just setting up what happens when those if and then say, oh, this happened, do this. So you're setting up the events in, and sometimes you want to see something really fascinating. There's a video, I should have linked it, about.
You absolutely can in the events. I totally invite you to do so.
Okay,
after
cool.
this.
Yeah, I'll do it. It's about Overwatch, which is a Blizzard game that I actually had some influence on. The lead designer on it was a fan of my mod, but the way they approach sound design is it's really fascinating. I can go into this for a while, but basically anything past 2 or 3 sounds humans can't really listen to. So they choose. So if you listen to like 2 voices, you can basically at the same time hear both conversations. You can hear 2 people, and you can regurgitate information that they said. You add a 3rd person, and then you have to choose because you can't really listen to it. So because games, you have 6 players on one side and 6 players on the other. Yes, they are. I see that, Gabby. I actually applied for a game design job on Overwatch 2, but they're looking for an expert. It was senior level, so it was like,
yeah.
Anyways, but what they did is they came up using WWise and their programming system where they prioritize sound based on like where the player is and what's generating the sound. So like you want a player to hear enemy sounds more than your own teammates, because your teammate sounds aren't as important. That's not information you need to play well. And anyways, it's a really long video, but it's really fascinating. But it'll give you an idea of what's happening in sound design there. So it's not just creating sounds, but there's some extra thought process there. But
so Fmod and just Wise?
Just Wise.
Okay, so Fmod and Wise are audio integration softwares. Are they free?
Both can be used for free to learn.
Okay, but you just can't like sell whatever you come up with without a license?
It depends. If you're making your own little indie game, if you have a budget of under $500,000 and you sell less than $200,000, then typically you could use them for free. And then the license on, I think on Fmod, if it's a little higher than that, then it goes up to like $2,000.
Okay.
And WWise is like 15 or 20 grand or something like that.
But for the sake of building a portfolio, you can definitely use these.
Yeah,
that's really good to
both
know.
of them. Both same with the game engines and those. And Pro Tools has a free version that has everything. Ableton has a free version. I'm sure there's other DAWs out there. So a kid watching this in high school, if he loves audio and he really wants to do it, you go on YouTube, you start following sound designers on Twitter and on social media, and you learn these tools. And you could have a job doing that. That's really, really great. Can you share again some of the other audio tools? I think you mentioned like Pro Tools and Logic, and what are those tools for? And what are some that people starting in the industry should try to learn? Those are what they call, DAWs, or audio recording programs. They're basically ways to record and mix sound, music, movies, any sort of audio manipulation. Basically, yeah. So they're audio recording programs. At the studios at DPA, we use Pro Tools. So and over time having to deal with that for so much, I've come to like be comfortable with it, but there's definitely other ones out there. And when I'm sitting here on my computer and doing stuff for my own game, I use like cheap free ones because I don't need a lot of bells and whistles sometimes to you just need the basics. But now that they're all, well, I should say years ago, the only way to get your hands on Pro Tools was to buy it for a couple of $1,000 or to find it on a pirate website, which I don't do. So I'm not just saying that like brushing it off. I'm like opposed to piracy for myself. I don't care if anybody else does it, but that's just not me.
Yeah.
But yeah, so nowadays, pretty much everything, even going back to the game engines, years ago when I was making my mod, it was a mod because you couldn't sell a game because game engines would cost like $500 to $1 million to license. Nowadays, you can get the Unreal Engine for 5% of whatever you produce. So if you make a game and you sell it, you just have to pay them 5%. And they let you use this amazing tool that's used in film and television and video games and, theme park attractions and you name it nowadays. Unreal's going everywhere.
So I was going to say, speaking of theme park attractions, can you talk about that Unreal Engine and just all the trends that you've seen with it? You mentioned that it's been used for The Mandalorian.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, anybody that has Disney Plus, go watch the making of. I forget what that's called. Let me answer Curtis Ball real quick. It really depends on what you're doing. Most of the time, you're worried about what you do affecting frame rate and stuff like that. So it tends to be more compressed, not too much, but they're WAV files. They're WAV files. I was like 48 or 44. I don't know. It depends. And the studios you work for, they're going to tell you how to record it anyway. They're going to tell you what they want, what format it's in, because they'll have programmers writing stuff to process it anyway.
So, WAV format you mentioned is more common, and again, for the sake of like making a portfolio, is it just perfectly acceptable to use that, or is there a difference between using that versus like an MP3 file?
Well, typically if you're going to make a portfolio for sound design, you won't have to worry about making WAV files. You're going to be making a video at the end of it.
Oh, so an MP4 when all is said and done. Yeah,
whatever. Yeah, or a QuickTime or whatever, H.264, or something that is going to play on every computer. That's the only thing. You want whoever's going to look at it to be able to play it.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question, Curtis.
But going back to the Unreal Engine, yeah, it's I have a friend of mine, I was telling you off the air, my friend Sydney Fox, who works for Imagineering and used to be in tech services. I remember talking to him about 5 years ago and asking him like, hey, are you guys looking at like any game engines to do ride animation stuff? Because right now it's all pre-rendered, which means it's like Pixar movie where they draw the frames and they're set forever and you put them up on the screen and they play them.
Right.
And that's how things had been done forever. But real time was getting to the point where the Unreal Engine was getting to the point where it would look like very realistic, and it's just gotten better over the last 5 years too, and it's about to take a giant leap forward with the next version, Unreal 5. And he was like, no, we're not doing that. We're going to be doing this. I'm like, yeah, but the whole idea is like you could have the perspective of the room change based on the ride vehicle, but you can't do that if it's pre-rendered. He was like, yeah, no. And then sure enough, now it's in the Millennium Falcon ride. It's being used in the what do you call it? Rise of Resistance.
The ride Toy Story Mania, is that an Unreal Engine?
I don't know. That might predate Unreal.
Okay, but is it a game engine?
It's absolutely a game engine.
Okay, because you're interacting with what's on the screen.
Yeah, it's absolutely a video game. Yeah, that's basically just a giant video game.
And when they're doing it in the attractions between Toy Story Mania or the new Star Wars attractions, how are they interacting with what's on the screen? Is it like an infrared sensor?
Well, actually, yeah, it is probably an infrared sensor with the Toy Story Mania,
Okay.
The Millennium Falcon ride is just a giant controller.
Right. That makes sense.
They took a joystick and they split it into two positions. So one does this way, one does this way.
It's absolutely fascinating.
Other than that, it's just a video game.
I think it's absolutely fascinating, like where attractions are heading.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was lost. I put myself at Disneyland and I let myself go there and I was there and now I'm back here and I kind of forgot like what we were just talking about.
Yeah, a little detour down the Unreal Engine being used and like I said, the Mandalorian. In the Mandalorian, what they do is they have this room called the Volume that's basically a bunch of LED screens as walls, and the cameras hooked up basically to the Unreal Engine and driving what's being drawn on the walls. So wherever the camera moves, the perspective of the walls never changes. So it gives this feeling of it being like a much bigger space, and you don't have weird perspective problems. And then they're using that as the lighting for the scene, which, like 10 years ago, having a character with fully reflective armor that's mirror, chrome reflective walking on a green screen would cause a very expensive process to make that not look reflect, so you don't see the green screen in armor. But now they can do it, the lighting's actually done by the LED screens using the Unreal Engine. That's off the subject of sound design.
Yeah, honestly, that is really, I don't know, to me it's quite mind-boggling. Maybe that's just because I come from rigging and I just play with rope.
Yeah, there's things to marvel about that too.
Thank you.
I've worked with riggers for pretty much my entire career at Disney. I've led them. I've actually done a little bit early on when the rules were way more lax at Small World.
Well, I would love to go back to Disney and hear about some of your experiences there and how you relate your experiences with sound over there to what you do in the gaming industry. Like, for example, not that this really applies to an attraction where the volumes are already set, but like if you're doing a live event, you've got the back of house, you've got the front of house operator, your A1, A2.
Actually very different. Really, it's closer to what I do at Disney Performing Arts, because at Disney Performing Arts, we were doing basically mini film scoring sessions. So we would record kids and then mix it all down. But again, it's very different. But the underlying skill set, if you understand the concepts of audio, what the tools do, how to manipulate it live, what a graphic EQ is, and the basic processing. Those things work the same in a recording program. So it's just a matter of like taking that knowledge you already have and applying it in a new field, basically. And that's, really what anyone could do with a little bit of time. I'd say anybody that has done, good work at Disney as an audio person that really understands audio, is probably a geek about it. Within about a couple of months could have a really good portfolio and a resume that shows that they deserve the job that they're looking for. It really, but again, you gotta play some video games.
Sorry, guys, you gotta play some video games.
Yeah, it's terrible, but yeah, that's again, it's like, it's one of those things, like I knew since I had kind of had my foot in it for so long, when I watched all these people that I've worked with forever, like struggling the same way, like I'm looking at living in Los Angeles as a stage technician or a live, just an entertainment person, even moving into television. There's suddenly a whole bunch of people with my same skills. I'll hit you up after this. You can look up my game. My game is killingmyfriend.com.
I'm sorry. I was going to type it up and have it scroll, and then I was like, should I?
Yeah, it's fine.
Killingmyfriend.com.
Yeah.
Cool. Guys, go check it out. That's awesome. Okay, why is that your domain name?
Oh, it's that's the name of the game.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Killing, comma, my friend. It's kind of like a film noir title.
Gotcha.
It's an action movie simulator. You are an action movie star filming an action movie, and the director's crazy and shooting real bullets at you.
That sounds hilarious.
Yeah.
But also maybe not. I mean, that's some serious stuff. Thank you for that question, because I got an amazing laugh out of that.
Yeah, and I don't know if you caught this earlier, Curtis. I do sound design on it, but my main focus really is game design. I just happen to know how to give you what information to give you if you want to pursue this. And again, that's kind of what the story I was get to is because I've been in it. It's kind of, even people that play games don't necessarily know how they're made. Everybody knows how movies are made, but games are this weird mystery. So if you don't know it, you might not realize how close you are to having the skills you need to get a job in an industry that's growing, where the live entertainment industry right now is on pause. Mm-hmm. And, as I was saying to you off the air, the video game industry is growing right now during the pandemic. They've done a record year of business. Mm-hmm. Because you're stuck at home. You can't do anything else. And I firmly believe that the live entertainment that we've experienced our whole lives is going to come back. I've said this through the whole pandemic that Broadway, the bar scene, theme parks, all that stuff was invented after the Spanish flu pandemic 100 years ago that killed 35 million people. Mm-hmm. Way worse than this. And they were young, healthy people that were dying during that. And after that was when all these things that we all know from our live entertainment life were created. So, it's going to come back someday, but the video game industry is definitely super stable and it's just going to keep growing. Eventually, all of us people of my age are going to retire that grew up while playing video games, and you're going to have even more time to play. Because right now I try and fit it in. Like I wake up a half an hour early and play for a half an hour before everybody wakes up, or after everybody's asleep. This is more like when I was working full time. I've had a little bit more time now. Yeah. Being off work, but so it's only going to keep growing.
Yeah, I can promise you guys, my partner is probably playing video games right now.
Yeah,
he's so supportive.
One of the things I love is when people say, like, "Aren't you too old to play video games?" I'm like, I've grown up with them. They've grown up with me. They're way more complex. There's video games that tell very poignant stories now. It's not Mario running across the screen anymore. They're much more complex.
But there's nothing wrong with playing that game still.
Right. No, both.
Yeah.
I'm actually kind of a game purist because I don't believe video games even need a story. They don't. Some of the best games ever made don't have a story. And a lot of people confuse the idea of like, oh, you need a story and a setting. No, those are just things that keep you engaged in the gameplay. But the gameplay is where the art of video games are. It's what separates it from things like film and television, which are very similar to stage. Those all things are related, but video games are a very different medium.
That's such an interesting point that you make, because when it comes to, when you're having conversations around marketing or around speaking or, even theme park attractions, everything is all about the story all the time. When you're a salesperson and, you got to play to people's emotions and you've got to put in the story. But I would be so curious to see like a debate between you and someone in marketing talking about how in gaming, the story isn't really necessary.
I mean, you can tell a story with the video game, but it's a different kind of story, especially like the more freedom you give a player. Well, the people writing the game don't even know how it's going to end necessarily, depending. So yeah, it's just what it is. It's definitely a different medium.
Well, I mean, yeah, if you think about Candy Crush, like what's really the story?
There's no story.
And even if there was a story, are you really paying attention to that story when you're playing Candy Crush or any of those games? No.
No, but you get into other stories. There's games that are predominantly story with good gameplay in it, like Naughty Dog zombie game whose name I'm just blanking on it. Last of Us. Last of Us is all story. That's what drives that thing. That's what makes people love that game, is the characters and the story in it. But it wouldn't have value as a game if the gameplay wasn't also good.
Mm-hmm.
And people talk about story when they talk about movies and stuff. But video games, it's the core loop. The core loop is the activity that you do over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. The better and more fun that core loop is, because you're going to be doing it thousands of times when you play a game. The more engaging and fun, whatever that means to whoever is the audience, it is. That's really kind of more what you're worried about when it comes to video game design. And again, everything else, part of that core loop is getting feedback. And then again, that brings us back to the game sound design is, for a game to feel engaging, you have to feel like when you fire a gun, you have to feel like you've actually done something, and you have to hear the result of it. And it's not enough to just see it. It really, like, sound design is an unsung aspect to video game. People talk about visuals and lighting all the time, but sound is super important. But it's also because it really hasn't changed as the tools have gotten slightly better, but what you're doing isn't.
Yeah. What's the most important aspect of Pavlov's dog? It's the bell.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's great.
I wanted to ask you a question about the International Game Developers Association. I was reading that there are special interest groups, and there is one about interactive audio. Are you involved in that group? Do you know anything about that group? And do you think people who are trying to segue into this industry should get involved with IGDA?
Well, yes, to an extent, to all of those things. I'm aware of them. I've actually been a member. They do help people that are more like in the freelance side of things. They have, since there's no union, there's no IATSE to help them out. They do offer stuff that like a union would, as far as like benefits type stuff through them, but they also do like host events and meetups and that sort of thing. There's also a organization called the Game Developers Conference that's huge. You can look them up, and if you find something useful there, great. But it's not necessary. Again, much like is very familiar to anybody that works in the entertainment industry, there is a lot of freelance work to be had in the video game industry. And if you want to live your life doing freelance, you can absolutely do that. There's people that work contracts, much like the film industry. You work for a short time on a game. When it ships, you're looking for your next work, or you can do like many of us did at Disney and go get a job for a company and work there. Both are done. And the IGDA is more of an independent organization, like it, not necessarily part of the larger industry as far as the big publishers go. So it can be a resource to when you go to look for a job. And that's something else I'd like to talk about at the end of this is when part of putting your portfolio together is there's a lot of people making independent games. In fact, a buddy of mine just hit me up. He's got a little game on Steam, and he asked if I could do some sound design work. I can't, but I said, well, maybe I know somebody. But there's a lot of independent guys like me making games in their, in their room with their computer that need that kind of expertise. And there's a lot of people, I'll tell you this, there's a lot of people out there that don't know anywhere near as much about audio as some of my peers at Disney and are self-taught. So there's no reason why you can't build on the knowledge that you have already working live audio and just add on top the video game side of things. And like I said, just a short couple of months of just looking for those skills and practicing them and understanding the software. Like, we've all had to do learning new techniques, new software, whatever. And
when so we've talked a lot about building a portfolio.
Mhm.
How once you have that, and there's nothing saying that once you have something presentable, you can't keep building that portfolio. But once you have something presentable, how do you find those opportunities? How do you seek out those independent game designers?
There's a couple of places. Reddit, our game design.
Cool. All right.
And you can go onto the Unreal message board, and I'm sure Unity has the same. Again, I don't know as much about Unity other than the basics. And you can put yourself out there to do work. Since you're building a portfolio, you might be, and we're sitting here in a pandemic, and you might be sitting at home doing nothing. You might be doing it for cheap and or free. Mm-hmm. For credit, which I hate to say, but if you're offering it, that's different than somebody expecting it from you.
Right.
Like, if your time's worth more, then charge something. Actually, I would say probably charge something. But if the something seems like hey, they're going to let me do some stuff on it, and you can get a credit on it, mm-hmm. by all means, you take the opportunities you can.
It seems like if you are like up and coming in the industry, say you're a student, you're in high school or college or just out of college, doing work for the credit is a really good route to go. But for those who have been involved in entertainment and events, who have extensive audio experience, who are switching industries, would you still strongly lean towards doing things for credit, or on like a lower?
No. Go ahead. I said if it seems right to you, then don't bar yourself from it because you have this opportunity to work on something for a couple of days. Mm-hmm. And you're using it to put your portfolio together, because that's the other thing, you're using it for that. And again, I'm very aware of the idea of like, oh, this is a portfolio piece, so we're letting you do something for us. No, yeah. But if you're seeking it out and you're saying, hey, I want to do my first thing. But yeah, most of the time you can probably ask to get paid, especially if you've come up with your own portfolio and you're showing it to those prospective indie guys. They may not have a lot of money, or they may just be able to pay you in I don't know, like a percentage of the game. No, I was going to say more like a percentage, yeah. Like a percentage, which can turn out to be huge if the mm-hmm. game blows up.
What would be like a good percentage? You mentioned something about like a software company only charging like 5% of the game's revenue, but as someone who is doing the sound design, would you say like in a contract, would 1% be sufficient, or is it more common to do like the 0.5%? What's
probably
like a good
0.5, yeah.
Okay.
Depending on how much you're putting into it and what they're willing to do. Mm-hmm. You really, what it comes down to is you got to weigh what your time is worth.
Right.
If you're an established audio person, but you're trying to break into a new industry, it might make sense to do something for cheaper than you would normally. Mm-hmm. But only you can answer that, really. If you're a kid, by all means, do it for free.
Yeah,
because you might not get a chance otherwise. If you're not, if you're an adult and you've had a career, then yeah, definitely be a little bit more. You could probably spend more time putting a portfolio together just on your own, like hopping on the Unreal Engine and putting one together yourself, and then capturing that video and showing that off while you're running around playing, and it's all your sounds. You replace everything from the sample games they have, which mm-hmm. is totally doable. I mean, they have sample first-person shooters, they have sample third-person shooters, they have all that stuff that you can go in there and just gut all of their sounds out and put all yours in and say, this is all me. And that might make more sense. You're essentially working for free, but you're not giving your work away to somebody else. It's for you. So
I think that's all really, really fantastic, actionable advice. I hope a lot of people, take something away from this interview for sure. I did see that you've recently, or maybe not recently, but I see you're on LinkedIn. So I was wondering if you've seen any groups that are in like the sound design. About video game sound design, or how has LinkedIn served you?
It's connected me with some people in the industry. I didn't get laid off, but I told you I am looking for work because I can't pay this mortgage for as long as I think we're going to be out.
Mhm.
Our little DPA, it's like all the DPA techs have a text group that we're in. You know, we've been in forever, and back in like April or May, everybody was guessing when we were going to go back to work, and they're like April or June, July 17th on the birthday, and I was like January. And everybody was shocked that I said that, but I just thought this was going to go longer. And now I'm very pessimistic when it comes to going back to work. I don't know that I'm going to even be able to survive it, even though I didn't lose my job. So yeah, I have been looking for work as a game designer, not as a sound designer.
Gotcha. So as a game designer, you are making connections on LinkedIn though.
Yeah. And I have friends in the industry that I've known from doing my video game stuff. So I have some connections there.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any other advice that we didn't really cover so far?
No, other than like, if this is something that you feel like you have, the skills to do, like, first of all, be honest with yourself. Otherwise you're going to waste your time. You're going to waste your own time. Because it is competitive, or it's not as competitive as trying to get a job as a rigger in LA right now. Right. Like
I'm not there, luckily.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like, but can you imagine?
I've
like, there's
too. So.
Yeah. Well, LA is just a little bit more draconian than other parts of the world when it comes to the rules, but so it is still competitive. But I believe that people in my industry, in our industry, like definitely have an edge, especially to someone that's trying to enter the industry, the video game industry. And a lot of people they have degrees and they're just as valid in the video game industry as the live entertainment industry. If you have a degree in audio, it will serve you just as well in another industry that's growing right now. And like I said, all these companies like came off of Christmas break selling gangbusters last year, and there is like you do a search on LinkedIn for audio jobs, 90% of them are going to be for sound design jobs in video games. And luckily there's a ton in LA. There's a ton in LA and Orange County. There's really a ton in Orange County. There's, everybody knows Blizzard's down there, but there's a whole bunch of other ones down there too. But you might have to move too. You got to be open to that.
Yeah. I will just say that we're going to wrap it up pretty soon here. So if there are any last minute questions for Dwayne, go ahead and write it in the comments below and I'll flash it up on screen, which can totally be taken out of context. I'm not flashing anything other than a comment like this.
Right.
Happy New Year. Thank you, Larry. It's so good to see you. Thank you guys for tuning in.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for these awesome questions. I want nothing but the best for you guys. Last year has just been so unfortunate and really unprecedented. For what it's worth, I honestly find a lot of comfort in knowing that so many people are not alone in, their mental wellness or in their financial situation. So, we've got each other. So, but yeah, like I said, I hope people can take away a lot of great information from this interview. I wish you guys the best. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Any last minute words from you, Dwayne?
I just want to echo what you said. Like, if I could help anyone that I know that, what they're going through, that's why I'm here. That's why I came on the show and agreed to do it, because like I said, I have knowledge that I can share, and it might be something that you hadn't thought about before, because it is such a different industry than regular entertainment that we all know. But it's definitely right next door, and your skills can serve you there as well. So
thank you so much for coming onto the show and sharing your advice with everybody. If you guys want to reach out to Dwayne, he's on LinkedIn, he's on Facebook. You can follow him on Twitter at oddjob1138. Don't forget to subscribe to Industry Explorers on YouTube. We've got some big plans for this brand and this platform. Thank you, Curtis. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys for tuning in. And until next time, I will see you guys on our next adventure. Take care.